Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by mybookie.ag. You could go on the gruelingtruth.net website, click on the banner, and it will give you up to $1,000 cash bonus on your first deposit. Also, we are brought to you by the Sheridan Report. Bobby Sheridan, check him out at Sheridan Report on Twitter. You could kind of combine those. You could go, see what Bobby thinks. Go bet it on mybookie.ag. Also, the Retired Boxers Foundation with Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. I am your co-host for a show that 3 weeks ago had no sponsors and now has three, Jeremiah, Mike Goodpaster, and now I want to welcome in Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm good. That's good news. It's good to have, some people backing us. And, we have thousands upon thousands of people listening to this podcast every week. So as always, we want to give you guys a big thank you as well.
All right, let's start off with the boxing news. Not a lot of boxing news, but we're going to start off Mauricio Sulaiman, who is the Jesus of boxing, at least with the WBC, compares Garcia and Spence to Leonard and Durand. What do you think, Jeremiah? Is this comparable?
I think that's I think that's probably inaccurate.
You think so?
Yeah. No, I mean, come on, man. It's Taylor Chavez. I don't know exactly where he's going with all this, but come on, it's not on that. I mean, if these guys had proven more, been given the opportunity to prove more, maybe it would be. But I'm not even sold Errol Spence is as good as a guy like Meldrick Taylor was. And again, it's not a knock on Spence. It's just I saw Meldrick Taylor beat up Buddy McGirt. All Spence has at this time is Kell Brook.
Yeah. So, and I think Mikey Garcia is a hell of a fighter, and I think that it's possible he's the best pound-for-pound fighter today. But this still is not Sugar Ray Leonard against, anybody. Maybe it's Ray Leonard against Ayub Kalule. How about that? That's a better comparison, I think.
Yeah, well, I think where he's going with that is, the whole Hispanic thing. I think that's where he's going with it. I mean, that's why he brought up Duran and Chavez, but it's not on that level. It can't be. Again, the only notable name Spence has on his resume, and again, this is not a knock on him. He very well could be as good as a lot of people say that he is. He looks talented to me. I like that he's a southpaw and he's a banger. There's a lot to like there, but there's also a lot to not like, and it's not.
Well, it's not like, it's that you don't know.
Well, the things that I don't like, and it's not necessarily his fault, but it's the fact that, he hasn't been managed that well, frankly. I mean, the guy's 29 years old, and he hasn't fought Thurman, he hasn't fought Porter, he hasn't fought Garcia. I mean, he's almost 30 years old, I mean, the time is ticking away. But, I mean, Garcia, I think, like you said, Garcia is a really, really good fighter. And I think, in a previous era when the competition was stiffer and, he'd be forced to fight better opposition, I think he would be a potential great. I mean, technically, he's beautiful. I mean, he has a wonderful jab. His technique is borderline flawless. Obviously, he can punch a bit. He's a thinker in there. His balance is really, really good. He's not a perfect fighter, obviously, but you just look at the guy and you see that there's a lot there. And again, it's the same thing with Spence. You see the potential there. But it's just these guys really haven't proven enough to be put on that same level of playing field. But of course, it's typical of Sulaiman, and I think Richard Schaefer is helping to promote this. So it's just typical of these guys to exaggerate the value of these fights, and it makes some sense. I mean, of course, if you want to sell tickets, you attach it to things like this, but it's just not accurate.
All right, let's go to a little bit more boxing news that came out today. It looks like Danny Garcia will fight Adrian Granados on April 20th in Carson, California. And I think it's safe to say this is Danny Garcia cherry picking again. What do you think?
Yeah, this is one of those in-house fights,
they've got
too.
Granados ranked at number 10 at welterweight. Has he won a fight against a welterweight?
I don't know. I know it's hard to... I'm trying to remember. I mean, because he's fluctuated a lot. He's one of those guys who seems like he'd fight just about whoever from 135 to 147. So I'm trying to think because I knew he fought Adrian Broner, but I think that was at 140.
I think that was at welterweight and it was a draw. But
Okay.
I actually thought he won, but I don't know if it's really a feather in your cap to beat Adrian Broner over the last few years. Everybody else does.
Yeah, I mean, right, yeah. No, I think it would have been a significant victory on his part, but of course, he wasn't going to get that win anyways. But no, it's Granados is a guy that comes and gets it. He is a guy who provides value. He's fun. He has high volume. He's tough. He doesn't go away. He's certainly a guy who has enough savvy in there. He's not a nuanced boxer or anything, but he's got enough savvy and strength and heart, to give you some rounds. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if this goes 12 as well. I don't see Granados as being on that level, of course, but and if he's moving up too, so it seems like in terms of size, he's a little outmatched here as well. But I don't know, it's like so many other things. I mean, it's not a great fight, and he should be shooting higher. But if this is his quote unquote soft touch for the year, and then he gets somewhat as a bigger name later in the year, I don't know. I guess I can't complain too much, but it's still not the fight that he should be in. I mean, they've got a loaded roster at PBC, and there are plenty of guys for him to fight.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say is Granados is a great kid. He always brings it. I got to meet him at Broner fight in Cincinnati. Great kid. But Garcia has lost 2 of his last 3 fights, and his only win in the last 2 years was against Brandon Rios. That's not saying a whole lot. I'd like to see him fight somebody a little bit better, but it's what you can come to expect. And you never know. Garcia may not throw any punches and give the kid a chance to beat him. So next up, it looks like Chisora and Joseph Parker may be fighting. I think this is an interesting matchup, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I don't mind that one at all. I mean, again, I've noted that, you and I agree that we don't think the heavyweight division is all that strong, but it seems as if these guys are doing a pretty good job of pairing them and getting the most out of it. I mean, Parker is a pretty good fighter. He was a top 5 guy not too long ago, when he fought Anthony Joshua. He almost had Dillian White out of there, who is a top 5 guy now. So, he's got some ability, and he can provide some entertainment if need be. And I hope he takes a more aggressive tact in this fight because it just, again, we're talking about entertainment value here, just kind of like I was referencing with Adrian Granados. But I think if he becomes aggressive, I think he can make this fight damn interesting. And I favor Parker here. I mean, White he has been past his best for years now. I mean, he is serviceable still, obviously. I mean, you see what he was able to accomplish against Carlos Takam. He's gutsy, he's gritty. He doesn't always show up in shape, and that's been one of his problems throughout the years, but it's just a good styles matchup. And, whoever, my guess is Parker earns a decision. I don't think he's going to stop White, though I'd like to see him get a stoppage. If Parker's going to build his stock back up, he's got to do something more interesting than just, coast to the finish line with these guys. And again, he did do some of that with White, but, against Joshua, he just seemed content to, again, just, clear the finish line and be done with it. I mean, and I guess if that's all he had for Joshua, that's all good and well. But, now he's got to bring himself back into contention and make himself a worthwhile foe. And with him being partly promoted by Bob Arum, it's like, well, where could he go? And I think we talked about this last show or the show before. And I think there's potential there that he may get a shot at Fury if Anthony Joshua is even further down the road. I mean, if the Wilder rematch doesn't come off immediately, or I could see a scenario maybe where Tyson Fury gets a soft touch right now, a real winnable fight. Maybe the Wilder rematch later this year, and then maybe a guy like Joseph Parker and then Anthony Joshua. Again, it's kind of hard to tell, but because Arum has ties to both guys now, you have to think that that could be in the cards.
All right. before we go to On This Day, guess what we've got, Jeremiah?
I hope we have a new Aragon Garcia.
Oh,
article.
ding, ding, ding. We have a new Aragon Garcia article. And this article says, Marcos Maidana showing off his new Mike Tyson moves.
Oh, Jesus.
Is that not awesome?
Oh, my God, dude.
And this is the article. I haven't read it yet. I just saw the headline, and I had to pull it up. The 35-year-old Maidana has got some weight to lose, but he's looking very good for a fighter that has been inactive since 2014. He's already lost a lot of weight from the photo that we saw. He looks to be at least 25 pounds lighter. And his right-handed punching power looks as lethal as ever. Each time he throws the right hand, you can tell it's filled with massive power. There's no drop-off from the power that Maidana had before he retired from boxing in 2014. This is what we get from him hitting gloves. We know his power is the same, Jeremiah. And this is the thing. If anything, Aragon says, Maidana might be punching even harder than before. He's gotten older, and the added weight that he's put on seems to have helped him by adding more power.
Well, I mean, if you're just talking about mass, then yeah, there is more mass there. That's true. He actually might be punching harder right now than ever just because of his weight. But I mean, if you're telling me that, the guy's going to be as sharp as he was before and, he's looking like a killer in training camp already. Jesus, man, I like Maidana. He was one of those guys that I rooted for when he was at his best. And he's always going to find a place in a lot of our hearts because of what he did to Adrian Broner. I mean, that was just a classic. That was just one of those fights you can rewatch. You're in a bad mood, right? Maybe you see a crappy decision or something in a card, or you just smoldering over something, and you watch that and it cheers you right back up. But I mean, like I said, I think on the last show, this dude is our casual Monday through Friday. I mean, he's always writing dumb stuff. And again, Maidana is a good fighter. I liked him, but you think he's going to come back after 2 years, grilling and barbecuing in Argentina. The whole time, getting fat, living high off that Mayweather money. I mean, Maidana was one of those guys who would, he was a go-getter. He punched hard. He came at you. He became a little better with with Robert Garcia's training. His jab sharpened up, and I really liked what I saw. And of course, like most people, you couldn't blame him after the two Mayweather fights that he was just like, hey, I'm just going to go live high on the hog and let that be that, own a farm in Argentina and, sail off in the sunset. Maybe he's gotten a little bored out there. The cows aren't, providing the conversation he needs.
More likely.
Yeah, probably spent the money. Yeah. So, but the thing about him is he is a recognizable figure. And because of what he did to Adrian Broner, so long as he can win the easy fight or fights back, he's going to get another sizable payday. I don't have much doubt about that.
Get this, because you've got to hear the rest of this. Because, Aragon says Alex Ariza now is in his corner, and with his help, Maidana will lose the weight without sacrificing muscle. Right now, Maidana would be a nightmare for anybody at 147.
Oh, God, Jesus. Anybody? What?
Anybody.
Okay. Okay, right now. I mean, the dude. I saw the video. I actually saw Alex Ariza. I don't know if it was rubbing his shoulder or doing some sort of stretch. Yeah, but I noticed that. And so he's working with a strength and conditioning coach. It seems like a number of them are kind of overrated. But that's a guy who worked with Pacquiao for many years. So I think he clearly knows.
Yeah. So what you're saying is he may be fighting at light heavyweight by the time we're all done.
Yeah, he might be a middleweight. I mean, it seems as if, and again, they're just rumors right now, but it seems as if he's going to try to make 154 for his first fight back, and then boil down a little bit more and fight at welterweight. But I look at the landscape, and what do I think a Marcos Maidana who's been off 2 years? What do I think he's really going to accomplish in the sport? I mean, what are they going to feed him to? A guy like Errol Spence?
Adrian
right, because he's got to be.
Yes, you can build an Adrian Broner fight, dude.
Yeah, you could build a rematch. I mean, that is something that a lot of people would watch. And I know Adrian Broner, say what you will about his attitude and whatnot, but he is one of those guys who is willing to fight whoever. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he thinks that he could possibly get revenge there, and yeah, they make that rematch. That wouldn't surprise me, but it seems like he's fairly closely aligned with the PBC. And if he was working with Alex Ariza, he was working with Pacquiao. Pacquiao's, working with the PBC now. So again, it seems like, who's he going to get? I mean, again, we were talking about Errol Spence, and they do have a good stable of fighters. Does he get Danny Garcia? Does he get Errol Spence himself? Does he get Keith Thurman? I think any of those are possible right now. I mean, of those guys, I think obviously Adrian Broner is the best pick, but Danny Garcia I think is probably the most beatable of that bunch. But I'm just not convinced that Marcos Maidana is even going to be a real big player in the division anyways. I mean, we can talk all this nonsense. Other fans can talk all this nonsense about him being a two-division titleist. He also lost a number of his fights too. It's all good and well that he fought Mayweather close in his first fight. But, we got to remember guys like Devon Alexander outboxed him clearly. And again, this is not going to be the same Maidana. So, I mean, I wish him well in his return. Again, I like the guy. I wouldn't mind depending on how far Maidana is over the hill, I wouldn't mind if they did kind of an all Argentina thing where, they put Lucas Matisse in against Marcos Maidana. I wouldn't mind seeing a fight like that. The Broner rematch, that's obviously going to attract some interest. But yeah, it's hard to see where he goes. But, we got to see him back in the ring and back in action before we can really gauge where he's at.
All right, what do you got on this day? I know you've got one of the epic fights, Mike Tyson and Bonecrusher Smith.
Yeah, one of Tyson's most fascinating and back and forth battles. On this day, yeah.
The interesting thing, it may be the only heavyweight fight where they fought 12 whole rounds, and Bonecrusher actually landed less punches than Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. He only landed 51.
Yeah, he was so tentative. I went back and rewatched some of that. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen a lot of Mike Tyson stuff.
You didn't watch it all.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't want to. Honestly, I started it, and Bonecrusher Smith he didn't look like he wanted it. He was throwing the occasional jab from time to time, and he whipped a few right hands at Mike Tyson, but honestly, it looked like he was scared or just afraid to engage for fear of being knocked out. And I will say that, Tyson didn't end up getting him out of there, but of course, those kind of guys are hard to beat, guys who are just out there to survive. And, Tyson, in his credit, he did some really nice things in the fight, even though it wasn't his most exciting fight or even close to it, really. He was jabbing consistently. He was throwing a nice little, he would slip to his left and then jab. He was trying to get in some power shots. He didn't body punch enough for my liking, but Bonecrusher Smith, again, he was in there to survive. He wasn't really wanting to engage. And I was pretty impressed with Mike Tyson's defense, too, though, of course, it's a bit easier to time these things. They're just coming in ones and twos. Bonecrusher Smith was not in there throwing combinations. He didn't come out with a fire under his belly. He just looked like he was in there to survive. But Tyson got the win, and I think it held some significance because he unified, alphabet trinkets or something.
Well, yeah, it was the heavyweight or unification tournament that HBO started, and the winner of this fight was supposed to fight the IBF heavyweight champion later in the year for the unified championship. But I think it was like a week before Tyson faced Smith. The IBF champion, it was Michael Spinks, who was coming off 2 wins against Larry Holmes, was stripped of the title for refusing to fight Tony Tucker, the sanctioned body's #1 contender. Spinks was the lineal heavyweight champion, and he would stay that way until he fought, Mike Tyson in 89 and 88 or 89. But he chose to fight Jerry Cooney instead of Tony Tucker, which to me shouldn't have got him stripped because He made like $10 million for fighting Jerry Cooney. He'd have made like $2 or $3 million for fighting Tony Tucker. So that to me is the obvious, what you should do. So that kind of threw a wrench in HBO's heavyweight tournament. And then, of course, Tony Tucker ended up later on in that year, like August or September, he fought Buster Douglas for the vacant IBF heavyweight title. He beat Buster Douglas, stopped him in like the 9th or 10th round, and then he went on to fight Tyson. And he gave Tyson one of Tyson's tougher fights, early on in his career. He went the distance, actually won a few rounds, and was hanging with him through the first 5 or 6 rounds, and then Tyson was just too much for him. But, yeah, the thing that was interesting here was how Michael Spinks got out of this tournament. And you really can't blame him because there's a lot more money in fighting Jerry Cooney than Tony Tucker. And it probably made Tyson Spinks that much bigger to fight it a couple years later.
Yeah, probably. I mean, Spinks did end up tuning Jerry up pretty good. But, like, Tony Tucker was
Jerry was drunk, so.
Yeah, wasn't he pretty? Wasn't he often drunk after the Larry Holmes fight?
Yeah, and if you want to hear all about that, you can go to thegrizzlytruth.net, punch in Jerry Cooney, and you can hear my interview with him. But I mean, Cooney's a great guy. He was a very underrated fighter. I mean, there's a guy that won 5 New York State Golden Gloves, so he could fight. But with this fight, the thing that concerns me is Tyson did some good things, but it seems like he did the same good things over and over again. And I think later on in his career, when he fought guys like Buster Douglas that could do things to him, he never was really good at figuring out in the middle of the fight how to adjust. And I don't think he adjusted with Bonecrusher Smith. He just kind of did the same thing over and over again. And it ended up being, to me, more like a damn ballerina than anything else, where Tyson would jab, lean forward, Bonecrusher would grab him, he'd let him grab him, then they'd break him up, and then they would do it again. So I think it showed a flaw in Tyson's game where he could do one thing. He could do the original game plan, but when it came time to adjust that game plan on the fly, he had a lot of issues with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually, Mike. It's like Tyson was a bit like a computer program, where he had certain things that he could execute, right? I mean, slip, right, jab, slip, and he always had a problem with letting guys hold him. I would think that if Customato would teach him something, it's how to get out of a clincher, how to infight. A Tyson who would have just worked out of the clinches would have been an even better Mike Tyson. And, with his shorter arms and fast hands, he could have made some paying that. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's like Tyson he was not really a thinker. He was just good at executing a variety of moves. And I know like that may sound odd to
kind of a robot.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, it's like somebody may find it may sound odd to somebody that they're like, oh, well, he had a variety of moves. Yes, but these were ingrained into him, from an early age with training. To me, that's what he was doing. He wasn't thinking outside the box of what Customato helped give him. And Rooney and all these other guys, he was just executing what he remembered. Again, he didn't look like one of those creative, make it up on the fly, be creative kind of guys. Like you said, he was kind of like a robot in that regard. And of course, again, I don't take it in the wrong way that I mean he was robotic in the way he threw punches or his technique or anything.
Robotic. There was a pattern to everything he did. And that pattern always stayed the same. And the thing was, when he fought guys like Buster Douglas and Evander Holyfield, especially Holyfield, with that pattern, after the first round or two, Holyfield knew what the pattern was, and Holyfield would grab him. And the difference between Holyfield and Bonecrusher Smith was this. Holyfield would grab onto him, but then Holyfield would walk him backwards and impose his will on Tyson, where Bonecrusher Smith would grab him and lean forward into Tyson and just wait for him to be broke up. So there was a plan for Holyfield to win that fight that way by, I think, his physical superiority, because no matter who punched harder, Evander Holyfield was the stronger man. And I think the other thing that shows you with Bonecrusher Smith, as big as he was stronger than Mike Tyson. And when Mike Tyson fought guys that were physically stronger than him, he had definite issues.
Yeah, and I think I think we talk about the computer programming and whatnot, and it shows. A lot of heavyweights are just not creative fighters. So a guy like James Bonecrusher Smith and many others. They weren't, so they had their go-to as well. But Tyson, because he had all these software programs running, he could execute again a wider variety of moves than these other guys could. Yeah, it was like heavyweights have always been pretty similar. They a lot of them just rely on the jab and right hand, and so that's the sort of predictable thing that helps guys beat him, whereas Tyson, again, he had a lot of different moves. He had uppercuts, he had hooks, there was there were more wrinkles to his game than the average heavyweight, obviously, but again, he's just executing the same thing over and over again. And with a guy like Holyfield, I mean, he had a guy like George Benton whispering in his ear. We're talking about decades worth of knowledge, and Holyfield was just one of those guys who could do just about anything too. Yeah, sure, he was smaller than a guy like Lennox Lewis, and wasn't a big heavyweight, but he could counterpunch, he could brawl. I mean, Holyfield was one. I think that's one of the differences, is that Holyfield was a guy who could create. He was a guy who could, get the opening if he needs to. He didn't rely on the same thing over and over again. He'd muscle you if he had to, but he just there were more wrinkles to his game, and he was creative. So a guy. I think you've mentioned this before, but a guy like Holyfield he's not going to lose to Tyson at any stage in his not any stage in his career. I'm not saying that, right? But I'm saying is, even if you have a younger, more prime Tyson, Holyfield's still going to beat him.
Because he's going to grab him, he's going to walk him back, he's going to be stronger than him. I mean,
yeah.
The thing is this: Tyson was still in his prime, 5'11" and weighed 215 pounds, around there, give or take 5 pounds. And
yeah, so I mean,
it's Holyfield. That's a dude that no matter how he got that weight, I mean, the dude was ripped, he was jacked, he was unafraid, and I think this. I think Mike Tyson in the end was a guy that's, and I've said this on the football show before, where you can't be afraid to lose. Mike Tyson was afraid to lose. I think that was his concentration, especially when things went bad and he would panic. Evander Holyfield is a guy that wants to win so bad that he'll figure out a way to win. He's not afraid to lose.
Yeah. He's one of those. He has that will that's rare, like that Henry Armstrong, Harry Gribb, they refuse to lose. You know what I mean? It's just it doesn't seem as if it's an option. I mean, and of course, Holyfield was obviously mentally very strong as well, because he did end up losing and he did end up coming back time and time again. He was just had an abominable will. He was just one of those guys who just didn't seem like he wanted to lose, and he went out and got it. And like you said, Tyson was just the opposite. Tyson was ready to fold it in, pack his bags, and I mean, and that's what happened. His
prime
right?
ended the first time he ever lost. That was it.
Yeah, well, and another thing about Holyfield, too, is that he was dedicated. He was a complete professional in his training. I mean, he was one of those guys that, you didn't need to be on his ass, wake him up at 5 a.m. and say, hey, you got to go run. Holyfield was one of those guys, almost like a Spartan, he just got up and did what he had to do, and he was in great shape all the time. I think even if we're talking about a Holyfield that's just at just entering the heavyweight division, I still think even if he weighs less than Mike Tyson, he's muscling Mike Tyson around just because of his will, because of his drive. Do you know what I mean? The
thing is this: a guy like Tyson is a guy that has a will or the drive during the fight. There's a lot of guys that have the drive and play as hard as they possibly can in the game. But then Adrian Broner's one of these guys. Adrian Broner always gives everything he's got, I think, in the ring. I mean, he don't throw enough punches. But will-wise, he comes to fight. Whether he's a great fighter or not, he's not. But he comes to fight. The reason he's not a great fighter and the reason he can't beat guys like Manny Pacquiao, guys like that, is because guys like Manny Pacquiao, in between the fights, are preparing to win that fight. You have to have the will to prepare to be great. You know,
Exactly.
anybody can have the will to win the game that they're in. The problem is this: once you line up against somebody who had the will to prepare, and you just had the will to play the game, that will to prepare is going to kick your ass at some point in that game.
Yeah, it's like Muhammad Ali said, I mean, you're winning these fights in the gym before you ever get in. And that's why guys like, as good as Riddick Bowe was, he wasn't, he eventually, he eventually couldn't sustain because he wasn't doing it in the gym like he should have. But Holyfield was one of those guys.
Could you imagine a Roberto Duran that had the will to prepare in between fights all the time?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't have to hear the excuse about why he didn't, prepare correctly for Leonard in the rematch. But yeah, I mean,
if you don't prepare correctly, that's on you, and that is your weakness. That is the difference between Leonard and Duran, and that's what I always say. Leonard was a far superior fighter because he always had the will to prepare to win, and when it got down to it, he figured out a way to win. He didn't win the first fight, even though it was close, but they fight 5-6 months later. He figured it out. And Duran had no answer for it. They fought a third time. Leonard did the same thing. Pretty much he did the second time. Duran never figured it out. He got beat. So there's a lot to be said for, as a boxer, football player, any kind of athlete, if you win in the gym before the contest even happens. Because if you go in there and you play somebody that was preparing and you weren't, you're going to get your ass beat, even if you're better than them.
Yeah, and there's a slogan in the gym my brother does coaching at, and I think it's a common one. I've seen it a number of times elsewhere, but it's like something like hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard, and it's and of course talent will complement something like that. That's why guys like Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao are great fighters, because they did prepare, almost as if they were poor, like they were still fighting through the ranks. But there's a big difference there between the guys who do and the guys who don't. And, with Roberto Duran and Ray Leonard, if they would have fought, 6 months later and, Duran was given all the time in the world to prepare, Leonard's going to win that third fight too.
Well, and they gave him like 8 years in between the second and third fight. He still couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Of course, that was a little right, but
that was way past both of their primes. But the thing that would tell me is this: even well past both of their primes, if you look at the shape they were both in that night, Leonard showed up to win the fight. Dan showed up to collect a paycheck because Leonard was already in his head. Because once another man makes you quit, hard to come back from that.
They own your ass.
They own your ass. All right. Anything else before we go, Jeremiah?
Actually, I'm probably going to skip the Charles Walcott thing. I want to bring some up that you probably remember because I just kind of caught wind of it. But Pipino Cuevas on this day was also knocked out by Herman Montez. And I take it you've seen that one, right?
Yeah. Herman Montez was a very underrated fighter.
And he blasted Cuevas. If you're listening to the show, go watch that knockout. I mean, Montez catches Cuevas with a mean left hook, and he spins around. It was almost comical or like video game like in the way that fight ended. He hit him with a left hook on the point of the chin, and Cuevas kept rolling the same way that he was throwing his own punch. So he basically kept rotating when he was throwing his own punch, and he spun all the way onto his back and got counted out. But that was a fantastic knockout.
The one thing to realize with that is this, though. That was 1985. That was Cuevas well past his prime. Cuevas was well past his prime when Roberto Duran knocked him out in 1983 in 4 rounds. Herman Montez, I don't think, does that in Pipino Cuevas' prime because if I remember right, Pipino Cuevas weighed like 155 in that fight, and I think Montez was like 152.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
Montez was past his prime too because Montez. I don't know. You remember James Bubba Buscemi?
No, that doesn't ring a bell.
He was from Beaumont, Texas. I think he usually wore pink trunks, but I think he might have got a shot against Arguello at some point. But they were building him up because he's a pretty white kid, if you know what I mean. So Montez lost to him, but Montez, I think his best performance maybe was he fought a draw with Rodolfo El Gato Gonzalez, who was a damn good fighter, ranked number 1 for a long time. But yeah, Montez was a good fighter. But the thing that I would warn there is these are guys that started fighting in the 70s. This was 1985. I think they were both well past their prime. And Montez, after that, lost to Jorge Vaca. You remember Jorge Vaca, don't you?
Yeah. We've talked about Baca in the past.
Yeah, Vaca fought forever. He got TKO'd by Vaca, and then he beat a guy who was at his professional debut in Jakarta, Indonesia. That was his last fight, which was like 8 months after the Cuevas fight. So even Montez was old then. Pepino Cuevas was a banger, though. The problem with Pepino is everybody can't get out of their mind Tommy Hearns just destroying him.
Yeah, I know. Well, again, that is one of those classic knockouts that is etched in the minds of those who saw it. So it is tough, but you got to acknowledge Cuevas for what he was, too. He was a banger. And actually, if you watch the Montez fight, he landed a number of good, clean shots himself. And, I think you're right. Prime for prime, Cuevas is coming out on top. He's knocking out Montez. But, it's just one of those knockouts that that's one of those ones that is hard to forget, too. I know. So I guess Cuevas had a couple of them in his career, but he was a damn good fighter. He had a bunch of defenses of his welterweight.
You look at him; he beat guys like Clyde Gray, who's a decent fighter, Angel Espada, Harold Weston, who I've had on the Legends show, who I think is a very underrated fighter. He beat Pete Granzani, who was solid. Randy Shields, who's been on the show before. Randy Shields was a damn good fighter. Gave Leonard all he could handle about the same time he fought Cuevas. Harold Volbricht, who was not very good. The key to Harold Volbricht is somebody in the WBA really loved Harold Volbricht because he stayed in the rankings forever. But Volbricht, I think that was one I saw on a pay-per-view. That was the same card, I think, where Tommy Hearns beat Pablo Baez by a 4th-round knockout. Also on that card was Sugar Ray Leonard and Ayub Kalule, because that fight was like 4 or 5 months before the Leonard Hearns showdown. And that was the fight. They were using that to build it up. And, about a year and 5 months, because after that is actually when Cuevas fought Hearns, and that was ugly. But Cuevas was never the same after that. He lost the fight to Duran. I think he lost to Roger Stafford. And that was, I think, right around the time that Roger Stafford was supposed to fight Sugar Ray Leonard for the title, but that's when Leonard found out about the detached retina. The interesting thing about that is this. When I was a little kid, every week you had to go get a TV guide to see what was going to be on the TV. And I remember that I look at the TV guide, it says, Sugar Ray Leonard versus Roger Stafford for the WBC Welterweight Championship of the World. And I was so excited. All right. And this is like a week out. So that's Saturday night. I'm sitting in front of the TV waiting for the fight to come on, and the fight never came on. There was no boxing. They just showed like Dallas reruns or some shit. I don't even remember. But I didn't find out until I got my Boxing Illustrated magazine like a month later that Duran was injured. Or not Duran, but Leonard was injured with the eye, and that's why the fight was called off. So I waited for 7 days for a fight that had already been canceled. That's why I like the internet now.
Yeah, I know. You get your news much, much quicker. But I remember Stafford was a ranked guy at that time,
I'll tell you,
too.
I saw you were training the other day. Did somebody punch you in the throat?
No, dude. Dude, it's these kids, man. I'm coming off they had
screaming
fevers
at them all the time. Oh, you're sick. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know how kids are, man. I do.
Screaming at them all the time. I know that. I always screamed at mine.
Yeah. Well, you got to keep the little,
kids.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to. Yeah. Yeah. You got to keep the little kids in line. It's that good cop, bad cop thing with my wife and I. I got to be mean to them when necessary, and then my wife cuddles them, and it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, that's what women do. And then you have to act like you're sorry that you disciplined them, or then she'll cut you off.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah. You got to stay within these imaginary guidelines, But yeah. I mean, you feel bad for with the kids. You try to apologize to them, but it's like, hey, you keep messing up, I'm gonna beat you again.
Yeah, wait till
It's
your mom leaves. See, when I was little, my mom would say, "Wait till your dad gets home." But when my kids
yeah,
got
right.
old, when I had my kids, it would be, "Hey, you wait till your mom leaves. As soon as she's out that door, I'm gonna whip her ass."
Yeah, well, well, I don't want to get political or anything, but it's good for the kids to have that balance. Hey, right. Again, your dad's going to come home and put you in line because I can't. So it's nice to have that balance. But
You know, the bad thing, most of the time, I'd get home from school, I'd get in trouble, and my mom would say, "Wait till your dad gets home. You stay in your room until your dad gets home and comes and sees you." And he'd never come in my room, and I'd be awake till like 1 o'clock in the morning waiting to get my ass wet. And it would never happen. And I guess that was the lesson.
Had you waiting the whole time, huh?
One out of
Hell,
every
that sucks.
10 times he'd come in and I'd get a spanking. But that was it. The other times they'd just leave me in there to think about what I'd done. And I thought about it. And then I'd do it again. But, all right. You ready to wrap this up, Jeremiah?
Let's do it.
All right, guys. Make sure you go to iTunes. Give us a like. Give us a comment. Rate us. Rate us highly. You can go to TGTN Boxing on Twitter, or you can follow us at Grueling Truth. You could also go to our Facebook page, The Grueling Truth. Give us a like and a follow there. If you have any comments, messages, you want to be on the show to debate anything you want, you can send us a message. Our email is thegruelingtruth@gmail.com. I think. I don't know. Does that sound like an email address, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I think that's ours.
Yeah, I had to do an Indiana basketball show right before this, and then I was on some Fox Sports show in Evansville before that, and then I did a 2-hour show with Risley today, so I'm about talked out. So with all that being said, you can hear me and Steve Risley tomorrow with NBA beat writers Cole Hanna and Bobby Sheridan from the Sheridan Report. Make sure, if you want to bet on some games, go check out the Sheridan Report. Once you hook up there, go to thegruelingtruth.net. Click on the mybookie.ag banner. You get up to $1,000 back cash bonus for your first sign up. And it helps out thegruelingtruth.net. And then I guarantee you this, if you follow what Bobby picks, you'll make some money off what you put in there. So make sure you go ahead and follow the Sheridan Report. Click the mybookie.ag banner, or you can put in promo code TGT50. That's promo code TGT50. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. You can hear all of our shows on YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, iTunes. Anywhere you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.